Victoria Chen adjusted her graduation cap one more time, making sure it sat perfectly straight on her head. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed down the royal blue gown that draped over her wheelchair. Today was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her life. 4 years of late nights, endless study sessions, and pushing herself harder than she ever thought possible had led to this moment. The university courtyard buzzed with energy. Everywhere she looked, families gathered in tight circles. Mothers fussed over their children's gowns, fixing collars and wiping away happy tears. Fathers stood tall with cameras ready, pride radiating from their faces. Grandparents clutched bouquets of flowers, their eyes shining with joy. Groups of siblings jostled for the best positions to take photos, their laughter filling the warm spring air. Victoria wheeled herself toward the designated graduate section, navigating through the crowd with practiced ease. She'd gotten good at maneuvering her wheelchair over the past 3 years. The physical therapy had been brutal, but she'd mastered every skill they taught her. Independence had become her armor, her way of proving to the world that the accident hadn't broken her spirit. But today, independence felt lonely. She found her assigned spot in the 3rd row and positioned her wheelchair carefully. The seat next to her reserved area remained empty. She pulled out her phone and checked it for the 5th time in 10 minutes. 3 missed calls from Jennifer, her father's executive assistant. Victoria's stomach tightened as she opened the messages. "Victoria, I'm so sorry. Emergency board meeting called. The Tokyo deal is falling apart. Your father is doing everything he can to wrap this up. He really wants to be there. He said to tell you how proud he is. He'll make it up to you." Victoria felt the familiar sting behind her eyes but blinked it away quickly. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry today. Not here, not in front of everyone. She'd heard these excuses before, learned their rhythm like a sad song played on repeat. Emergency meetings, last-minute crises, deals that couldn't wait. Her father, Richard Chen, had built Chen Industries from the ground up into a billion-dollar empire. That kind of success demanded sacrifices. She understood that. She just wished she wasn't always the one being sacrificed. 3 years ago, everything had been different. She'd been a carefree 19-year-old, excited about her sophomore year of college. Her father had called her that night from a business dinner. She'd been laughing with friends. And when her phone rang, she'd rushed to answer it while driving. The distraction had lasted only seconds, but seconds were enough. Her car had swerved, then flipped. When she woke up in the hospital 2 days later, her legs wouldn't move. The doctors said her spinal cord injury was permanent. Her father had been there those first weeks, sleeping in the hospital chair beside her bed, holding her hand through the worst moments. But as the months passed and the initial crisis faded, he'd slowly retreated back into his work. The hospital visits became shorter, the phone calls less frequent. He'd convinced himself that providing the best doctors, the finest rehabilitation center, and unlimited resources was the same as being present. Victoria had learned not to expect him at her physical therapy milestones. She'd stopped asking if he'd come to her university events. Hope hurt too much when it was repeatedly disappointed. Around her, the ceremony preparations continued. A girl in the row ahead turned to her parents, all 3 of them wearing matching university t-shirts. They pulled her into a group hug, their joy so pure and unguarded that Victoria had to look away. To her left, a young man in a wheelchair like hers received congratulations from what appeared to be a dozen family members, all of them talking over each other in their excitement to celebrate him. Victoria straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. She'd worked too hard to let anyone see her fall apart. She had every right to be proud of herself. A business degree from one of the top universities in the country, earned with a near-perfect grade point average while managing a disability. She'd done internships, led student organizations, and proven that her paralysis was just a detail, not a definition. The world would see Victoria Chen as strong, capable, and completely fine on her own, even if she didn't feel that way inside. The ceremony coordinator's voice crackled through the loudspeakers, asking graduates to begin taking their seats. Victoria positioned herself in line with the others in her row. That's when she noticed the man sitting in the row behind her. He was probably in his mid-40s, with kind eyes and an easy smile. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and he wore a simple suit that looked well-loved but carefully pressed. What caught Victoria's attention was the way he kept glancing at her empty reserved section, then at her, a troubled expression crossing his face. Next to him sat a young woman about Victoria's age, wearing the same graduation gown. The two shared the same warm brown eyes and quick smile. Clearly father and daughter. Victoria had seen the girl around campus before, remembered her from a study group last semester. Her name was something with an L. Lily, maybe? She'd been brilliant. Always the first to grasp complex engineering concepts that made Victoria's head spin. The man met Victoria's eyes for a brief moment and gave her an encouraging nod. The kind that said, "You've got this." It was such a small gesture, but something about it made Victoria's throat tighten. She nodded back and quickly looked away, focusing on the program in her lap. The university president took the stage, welcoming everyone to the graduation ceremony. His words about achievement and bright futures washed over Victoria. She tried to concentrate, tried to feel the excitement she'd imagined feeling on this day. But the empty seat beside her pulled at her attention like a missing tooth. Her tongue couldn't stop exploring. She pulled out her phone one more time, shielding the screen from the sun. No new messages. No miracle last-minute text saying her father had found a way to make it after all. She typed out a message to Jennifer. "It's okay. Tell him not to worry about it." Her finger hovered over the send button. Was it really okay? When had she decided that being constantly disappointed was acceptable? When had she learned to make herself small enough to fit around her father's schedule? She deleted the message without sending it and tucked her phone away. The opening music began to play, and all around her, graduates straightened in their seats. This was it. The moment she'd worked toward through countless challenges and obstacles. Victoria Chen was about to graduate with honors, and she was going to walk across that stage, or wheel across it rather, with her head held high, even if she had to do it alone. The processional music swelled, and the ceremony officially began. Victoria told herself that the ache in her chest was just nervousness, just the normal anxiety any graduate would feel. She almost believed it. The names were being called alphabetically, and Victoria knew hers would come soon. She watched as her fellow graduates wheeled or walked across the stage, each one greeted by cheers from their corner of the audience. The sound of families celebrating their children filled the outdoor amphitheater, a chorus of love and pride that seemed to echo off every surface. Benjamin Carlson. Applause erupted from the left side. Michelle Carter. More cheers. Someone whistled loudly. Victoria Chen. Victoria took a deep breath and began wheeling herself toward the ramp that led up to the stage. The university had made sure the platform was accessible, and she'd practiced this route twice during rehearsals. Her arms moved smoothly, pushing the wheels with confidence. She'd worn her favorite blazer under her gown, deep emerald green, because it made her feel powerful. Today she needed all the power she could gather. The ramp felt longer than she remembered. Each push of her wheels seemed to take forever. She kept her eyes forward, focusing on the provost, who stood waiting with her diploma. The polite applause continued. The kind of respectful clapping that audiences give every graduate. Nothing special. Nothing that said anyone out there was particularly celebrating her achievement. Then she heard it. "Yeah, Victoria. Way to go." The voice was loud, enthusiastic, impossible to ignore. It cut through the polite applause like a spotlight. Victoria's head turned instinctively toward the sound. There, standing up in his seat with his hands cupped around his mouth, was the man from the row behind her. His face was lit up with genuine joy, and he was clapping like she'd just won an Olympic medal. The people around him smiled at his enthusiasm. Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks, but it wasn't embarrassment. Something warm and unexpected bloomed in her chest. Someone was cheering for her, really cheering, the way fathers cheer for their daughters. She didn't know this man, had never spoken to him, but in that moment his kindness felt like a lifeline. The provost handed her the diploma with a warm smile. "Congratulations, Miss Chen. Your professors speak very highly of you." "Thank you," Victoria managed to say, though her voice felt thick with emotion. She posed for the official photograph, diploma in hand, trying to smile naturally. Then she made her way down the exit ramp on the other side of the stage, her heart beating faster than it should have been. The ceremony continued for another hour. More names, more applause, more families erupting in celebration. Victoria tried to focus on the speeches about bright futures and limitless potential, but her mind kept wandering. She kept thinking about that empty seat, about all the empty seats over the past 3 years, physical therapy graduations, where she'd learned to transfer from her wheelchair to a regular chair, university award ceremonies where she'd received academic honors, the day she'd completed her first internship. Her father had missed them all, each absence explained away by emergencies that always seemed more important than her milestones. Finally, the ceremony ended. Caps flew into the air, and graduates rushed toward their families. The orderly rows dissolved into chaos as people hugged and cried and laughed. Victoria wheeled herself away from the crowd, heading toward the old stone fountain at the edge of the courtyard. It was quieter there, shaded by ancient oak trees that the university had preserved since its founding. She sat there watching other families celebrate, telling herself it was fine, that she was used to this. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "So proud of you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. We'll celebrate this weekend." The same promise he'd made a dozen times before, and broken just as many. Victoria felt the tears coming and couldn't stop them this time. They slid down her cheeks silently, each one carrying 3 years of disappointment and loneliness. She'd been so strong for so long, pushing through every challenge, never complaining, never asking for help. But today, watching everyone else surrounded by people who loved them enough to show up, her strength finally cracked. "Victoria?" She quickly wiped her face and looked up. The man from the audience stood a few feet away, his daughter beside him. Up close, Victoria could see the kindness in his eyes was matched by laugh lines around his mouth. His daughter, Lily, she remembered now, looked concerned but not pitying. "I hope we're not intruding," the man said gently. "My daughter told me you two studied together last semester, for Professor Martinez's business strategy class." "Right," Victoria said, trying to compose herself. Lily smiled. "You're better at the financial modeling parts. I barely passed that section." An awkward silence fell. Victoria could tell they'd noticed her tears, noticed the empty space where her family should have been. She braced herself for the pity, the sympathetic head tilts, the careful questions that really meant, "Why are you all alone?" Instead, the man said something unexpected. "We're heading to Tony's Italian kitchen to celebrate. It's nothing fancy, just really good pasta, and probably too much garlic bread. Would you like to join us?" He spoke casually, as if he was inviting a friend, not a stranger who'd been crying by a fountain. No graduate should spend this day alone. Victoria's first instinct was to say no. She didn't need charity. She didn't need these people feeling sorry for her. She'd learned to handle disappointment on her own, had built walls thick enough to protect herself from expecting too much from anyone. But something stopped her from refusing. Maybe it was the genuine warmth in his invitation, free from any hint of pity. Maybe it was Lily's hopeful expression, like she really wanted Victoria to say yes. Or maybe Victoria was just tired of being alone, tired of pretending that independence was the same thing as happiness. "I don't want to intrude on your celebration," Victoria said carefully. "You wouldn't be intruding," Lily said quickly. "Honestly, it'll be nice to have someone else there. Dad tells the same embarrassing stories every year, and maybe with you there he'll spare me the one about my science fair volcano disaster." "That volcano disaster was a valuable learning experience," her father said with mock seriousness, though his eyes sparkled with humor. Besides, Tony makes enough food to feed a small army. We'd actually be doing us a favor by helping us eat it all. Victoria found herself smiling despite everything. There was something easy about these two. Something that made the tightness in her chest loosen just a little. She looked at her phone again. At her father's text promising a celebration that probably wouldn't happen. Then, back at these two kind strangers who were actually here, actually asking. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you. I'd like that." "Great." Lily's whole face lit up. "Fair warning, though. My dad will probably ask you a million questions about your plans after graduation. He's a teacher, so he can't help himself." "High school English," the man said, extending his hand to Victoria. "I'm David Thompson, and I promise to keep the interrogation to a minimum." Victoria shook his hand, noticing how warm and steady his grip was. "Victoria Chen. And honestly, questions sound nice. Better than sitting alone with my thoughts." As they walked together toward the parking lot, David pushed his daughter playfully on the shoulder, and Lily laughed, pushing him back. Their easy affection reminded Victoria of something she'd almost forgotten. Family wasn't supposed to be about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was supposed to be about showing up, about being present in the small moments and the big ones. For the first time that day, Victoria felt like, maybe, just maybe, this graduation wouldn't end in loneliness after all. Tony's Italian Kitchen was the kind of restaurant that felt like stepping into someone's home. Red checkered tablecloths covered every table, and the walls were decorated with old family photographs and vintage Italian postcards. The smell of garlic and fresh basil hung in the air, making Victoria realize she hadn't eaten anything since early that morning. David had called ahead, and they were seated at a corner booth with extra space for Victoria's wheelchair. The owner, an elderly man with a thick accent and an even thicker mustache, came over personally to congratulate Lily and Victoria on their graduation. He insisted on bringing them a complimentary appetizer, appearing minutes later with a plate piled high with bruschetta. "So," David said once they'd ordered, "business degree from one of the top universities in the country. That's impressive. What's next for you?" Victoria picked at the edge of her napkin. "I'll be working at Chen Industries, my father's company, starting in the strategic planning division." "Your father must be really proud," David said warmly. A Chen Industries heir, with her own degree. That takes dedication. Something about his genuine tone, the lack of assumptions, made Victoria's carefully constructed walls crack a little wider. She let out a laugh that sounded more bitter than she intended. "He doesn't really need me to have a degree. He needs me to smile at charity events and show up at galas. Proof that the accident didn't break me. Or, more importantly, proof that it didn't damage the Chen Industries' image." The words hung in the air. Victoria immediately wished she could take them back. These were strangers. Kind strangers. But strangers nonetheless. She didn't owe them her pain, didn't need to burden them with family drama they couldn't possibly understand. But David didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't rush to change the subject or offer empty platitudes. He just listened, his expression open and understanding. "The accident," Lily said gently. "Is that when?" 3 years ago, Victoria said, surprised at how easily the words came now that she'd started. "Car accident. I was a sophomore. My father called me from a business dinner, and I was stupid enough to answer while driving. Got distracted for maybe 5 seconds. That's all it took." She told them about waking up in the hospital, about the doctors explaining that her spinal cord injury was permanent, about her father sitting beside her bed those first terrible weeks. But she also told them about what came after. The gradual disappearance, the missed physical therapy sessions, the empty seats at every important moment since. "He was there at the beginning," Victoria said, staring at her water glass. "But I think watching me struggle was too painful for him. Or maybe he felt guilty. I don't know. It was easier for him to throw money at the problem. Best doctors, top rehabilitation center, private nurses, everything, except the one thing, I actually needed. Which was, David asked softly, for him to just be there, to sit with me, even when it was hard, even when I was angry and frustrated and taking it out on everyone around me. Victoria felt tears threatening again, but pushed them back. But CEOs don't have time for that kind of thing. I guess. There's always another deal, another crisis, another meeting that can't wait. The waiter arrived with their food, and the conversation paused. Victoria was grateful for the interruption, suddenly self-conscious about how much she'd revealed. But as they started eating, David began to share his own story, and Victoria found herself leaning in to listen. I was supposed to be a corporate lawyer, David said, twirling pasta on his fork. Had a job lined up at one of the biggest firms in the city. 6-figure salary, partnership track, the whole package. Then my wife got sick. Lily reached over and squeezed her father's hand. Victoria could see this was a story they'd both lived through. A pain they'd learned to carry together. Cancer, David continued. Aggressive. She fought for 2 years. But we knew pretty early on that we were living on borrowed time. And I realized something during those 2 years. All the money in the world, all the success and prestige, it meant nothing compared to time. Time was the only currency that actually mattered. He explained how he'd turned down the corporate job and taken a position teaching high school English instead. The pay was a fraction of what he could have made. But he was home every evening. He attended every single one of Lily's school events, from elementary school plays to middle school science fairs to high school debates. After Mom died, Lily added, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Dad could have gone back to corporate law. Everyone told him he should. That he was wasting his education, his potential. But he didn't, because I'd learned something, David said. I'd learned that being present for the people you love isn't a sacrifice. It's the whole point. Everything else, the career achievements, the money, the status, it's all just noise if you're not sharing it with the people who matter. Victoria felt something shift inside her chest. She thought about her father, about the empire he'd built, about the billions of dollars and the global influence. She thought about the empty seat at her graduation and all the other empty seats before it. What was it all worth if there was no one to share it with? Money was tight, David admitted. There were years where I worked 3 jobs during the summer, just to make ends meet. Tutoring, teaching summer school, freelance editing. But I was at every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game, every doctor's appointment. I saw Lily grow up, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. Even when I was a nightmare teenager? Lily teased, though her eyes were shining. Especially then. David laughed. Though I'll admit, the year you dyed your hair purple and decided you were going to drop out and join a rock band, tested my commitment. They all laughed, and Victoria felt some of the heaviness lift from her shoulders. She watched David and Lily together, the easy way they communicated, the obvious deep affection between them. This was what family looked like when people chose to show up for each other. I'm not judging your father, David said, his tone careful. Running a global corporation? That's a pressure I can't even imagine. The decisions he makes probably affect thousands of people. That's a huge responsibility. But, Victoria prompted, sensing there was more. But, David continued gently, responsibility to the world doesn't erase responsibility to the people closest to you. And sometimes, the most successful people forget that. They convince themselves that providing material things is the same as providing presence. That paying for opportunities is the same as being there to celebrate them. Victoria nodded slowly. She'd never thought about it quite that way. But David had put words to something she'd felt for years. Her father had given her everything except himself, and no amount of money or resources could fill that specific emptiness. The thing is, Victoria said quietly, I don't even think he realizes what he's doing. He genuinely believes he's being a good father by working so hard, by building this legacy for me. He thinks the company is his gift to me. But you'd trade it all just to have him show up, Lily said. It wasn't a question. In a heartbeat, Victoria admitted. I'd trade the company, the money, all of it, just to have him sit with me at graduation, to have him ask about my day and actually listen to the answer. To feel like I matter more than a quarterly earnings report. David was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that would stick with Victoria for a long time. You know what the saddest part is? Someday, when it's too late, he'll realize what he missed. He'll look back and see all these empty spaces where memories should have been, and all the money and success in the world won't buy him a second chance. Victoria felt tears slip down her cheeks. But this time she didn't try to hide them. Lily handed her a napkin, and David gave her space to feel what she needed to feel. They didn't rush to make her feel better or tell her everything would be okay. They just sat with her in her sadness. And somehow, that felt like the kindest thing anyone had done for her in years. As they finished their meal, and the conversation drifted to lighter topics, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt seen, not as Richard Chen's daughter, not as the paralyzed girl who'd overcome adversity, not as a future executive at a major corporation, just as Victoria, a young woman who deserved to be celebrated, who deserved to have people show up for her, who deserved more than empty promises and hollow apologies. When they finally left the restaurant, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. David walked with them to the parking lot, and before they parted ways, he turned to Victoria with a serious expression. I know we just met, he said. But I hope you remember something. You deserved to have your father there today. And the fact that he wasn't, that's on him, not you. You've accomplished something remarkable, and no one can take that away from you. Victoria nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Lily gave her a quick hug, and they exchanged phone numbers, promising to stay in touch. As Victoria drove home alone, her diploma sitting in the passenger seat, she felt different somehow. The day hadn't gone as planned, but maybe it had given her something more valuable than she'd expected. It had shown her what family could be when people chose to show up. Richard Chen's private jet touched down at the regional airport just after midnight. He'd spent the last 8 hours on video calls, negotiating with the Tokyo investors, salvaging a deal worth $300 million. The deal was saved. The board would be pleased. Chen Industries' stock would rise on Monday morning. By every measure that mattered in his world, today had been a success. But as he sat in the back of his town car, watching the city lights blur past his window, success felt hollow. His assistant, Jennifer, had sent him a single text an hour ago. She said it's okay. She said not to worry about it. That message had hit him harder than any angry words could have. His daughter had stopped expecting him to show up. She'd learned to accept his absence as normal, as inevitable. When had that happened? Oath? When had that happened? When had he become the kind of father whose child no longer bothered to be disappointed? Richard pulled out his phone and scrolled through his calendar. The past 3 years appeared in blocks of meetings, conferences, negotiations, and deals. He tried to remember the last time he'd had dinner with Victoria, just the two of them, with no business associates or charity event obligations. He couldn't. He thought about the accident, about getting that call from the hospital. He remembered running through the emergency room doors, still in his tuxedo from the business dinner. The doctor's words had felt unreal. Spinal cord injury, permanent paralysis, wheelchair, for life. His 19-year-old daughter, who'd been so full of energy and dreams, suddenly facing a completely different future, and it was his fault. He'd been the one calling her. If he hadn't phoned her at that exact moment, if he'd just waited until she got home, if he'd prioritized his daughter over whatever business matter had seemed so urgent that night, none of it would have happened. The guilt had been crushing. Watching Victoria struggle through physical therapy, seeing her frustration and pain, knowing he'd caused it, had been unbearable. So he'd done what he always did when emotions became too difficult. He'd thrown himself into work. He'd convinced himself that earning money to pay for the best medical care was how he could help, that building a company she could one day inherit was how he showed his love. But somewhere in those 3 years, he'd stopped being her father and become her benefactor. A distant figure who signed checks and sent assistants with apologies. When had he last looked her in the eye and asked how she was really feeling? When had he last sat with her, without checking his phone, every 5 minutes? When had he last made her feel like she was the most important thing in his world? The car pulled up to Victoria's apartment building. Richard had bought her this place. A modern, accessible unit close to campus. Everything about it was top of the line, from the automated doors to the custom bathroom. He'd made sure she had everything she could possibly need. Everything, except him. He took the elevator to her floor, his heart pounding harder than it had during the entire Tokyo negotiation. It was nearly 1 in the morning, but he could see light coming from under her door. He knocked softly, half hoping she wouldn't hear it, that he could come back tomorrow when he'd figured out what to say. But the door opened. Victoria sat there in her wheelchair, still wearing her graduation gown. Her eyes were red, and he could tell she'd been crying. When she saw him, surprise and hurt flashed across her face in equal measure. "Dad? What are you doing here?" Richard's carefully planned speech evaporated. All the words he'd rehearsed in the car disappeared. He stood there, in his expensive suit. This powerful man, who commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals, and he had no idea how to talk to his own daughter. "I'm sorry," he finally managed. His voice cracked on the words. "Victoria, I'm so sorry. You've said that before." Her tone wasn't angry, just tired, resigned. That was somehow worse than anger. "Can I come in? Please?" Victoria hesitated, then wheeled backward to let him enter. Her apartment was immaculate, decorated with the good taste money could buy, but lacking any real personal touch. It looked like a showroom, not a home. Had he even been here since she'd moved in? He couldn't remember. They sat in silence for a moment. Richard, on the designer couch. Victoria, by the window. The graduation program sat on her coffee table, and he picked it up with shaking hands. There was her name. Victoria Chen, Bachelor of Business Administration, summa cum laude. His daughter had graduated with highest honors, and he hadn't been there to see it. "Jennifer sent me the photos," Victoria said quietly. "From the ceremony. Professional shots. They're very nice." "That's not the same," Richard said. "That's not even close to the same." "No, it's not." Victoria turned to look at him directly. "But it's what I've learned to expect from you, Dad. Photos instead of presents. Expensive gifts instead of time. Apologies instead of change." Each word landed like a physical blow. Richard wanted to defend himself, to explain about the Tokyo deal, about the emergency board meeting, about how important it all was. But looking at his daughter's face, he realized how pathetic those excuses sounded. There would always be another deal, another crisis, another meeting. There would never be another graduation day. "You're right," he said. "You're absolutely right. And I have no excuse. I've been telling myself I was building this empire for you. But really, I was just hiding." Hiding from what? Richard took a deep breath. This was the conversation he'd been avoiding for 3 years. Hiding from how scared I was when I almost lost you. Hiding from the guilt of knowing I caused the accident. Hiding from how helpless I felt watching you suffer. His voice broke. "I didn't know how to help you, Victoria. I didn't know what to say or do. So I did what I'm good at. I made money. I built the business. I convinced myself that providing opportunities was the same as being a father." Victoria's expression softened slightly, but the hurt was still there. "I didn't need you to fix me, Dad. The doctors and therapists did that. I needed you to be there while I learned to live with this new reality." I needed you to see me struggling and stay anyway, even when it was uncomfortable. Even when you didn't have all the answers. I know that now, Richard said. But I was a coward. Every time I saw you in pain, I felt like I was drowning in guilt. It was easier to stay at the office, to focus on problems I could actually solve. So you solved Tokyo's problems instead of showing up for your daughter's graduation. The words weren't accusatory, just stating a fact. Yes. Richard couldn't even look at her. And it wasn't just today. I missed your physical therapy graduation, the ceremony where you transferred from wheelchair to car for the first time. I missed your Dean's List receptions. All 3 of them. I missed your 21st birthday because I was in Singapore. I missed everything that mattered. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, younger than her 22 years. Do you know what the worst part was? It wasn't that you weren't there. It was that I stopped being surprised. I stopped hoping you'd show up because hope hurt too much when you disappointed me over and over again. I trained myself not to need you. Richard felt tears on his face and didn't bother to wipe them away. I don't deserve your forgiveness. No. Victoria agreed. You don't. But I need you to understand something, Dad. I don't want your guilt. I don't want your money. I don't want the company or the legacy or any of it. I just wanted my father. I wanted you to be proud of me. To see me as more than a problem. To be solved. Or an obligation. To be managed. I am proud of you, Richard said urgently. Victoria, you're the most remarkable person I know. What you've accomplished, how you've handled everything life threw at you, your strength and intelligence and grace. I'm in awe of you. Then why weren't you there to tell me that? Why did I have to hear a stranger cheer for me at my own graduation? Victoria's voice finally broke. Do you know what happened today? Why half today? Why half today? Why half today? A man I'd never met stood up and cheered when my name was called. And his daughter, who I barely know, invited me to lunch because she felt sorry for me sitting alone. These strangers showed me more kindness in one day than you've shown me in 3 years. Richard felt like he'd been punched in the chest. Strangers had celebrated his daughter's achievement because he'd been too busy to do it himself. Tell me about them, he said quietly. So Victoria told him about David and Lily. About lunch at the Italian restaurant. About David's choice to give up a lucrative law career to teach high school so he could be present for his daughter. About the easy affection between them. The obvious love and respect. About how they'd made her feel seen and valued in a way she hadn't felt in years. He told me something, Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. He said that someday you'd look back and realize what you missed, that you'd see all these empty spaces where memories should have been, and no amount of money would buy you a second chance. Richard closed his eyes. The teacher was right. He'd been so busy building a financial legacy that he'd neglected to build a relationship with his own child. What good was leaving her a billion-dollar company if she couldn't stand to be in the same room with him? I can't get back the time I've lost, Richard said. I can't undo 3 years of absence and broken promises. But I need you to know something, Victoria. Today, listening to you, seeing what I've done to you, to us, it's the wake-up call I should have had 3 years ago. I've heard this before too, Victoria said wearily. I know. But this time, I'm not just apologizing. I'm changing everything. Richard pulled out his phone and, with Victoria watching in shock, started typing an email. I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations. I'm appointing Karen Mitchell as co-CEO. She's been running half the company anyway. It's time to make it official. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Because you're right. I've been choosing the company over you for 3 years, and I can't do it anymore. I don't want to. The business will survive without me running every detail. But our relationship won't survive if I keep doing what I've been doing. He hit send on the email. There. Done. The board can argue about it on Monday. But I don't care. Victoria stared at him. And Richard could see she wanted to believe him, but was afraid to hope. He didn't blame her. He'd broken her trust too many times. Actions, not words, Richard said. That's what matters now. So here's what I'm proposing. We start over. Not all at once, because trust isn't rebuilt overnight. But we start. Coffee once a week. Dinner twice a month. No phones, no business talk. Just us. And I show up. Every time. No excuses. And when the next crisis happens, Victoria asked. When Tokyo falls apart again, or the stock crashes, or whatever emergency comes next, then someone else handles it, Richard said firmly. Because I finally understand what that teacher knew. Time is the only currency that truly matters. And I've wasted enough of it. They talked until the sun came up. Really talked. For the first time in years. 2 months had passed since graduation, and Victoria still wasn't sure if she believed the change would last. Her father had kept his promises so far. Coffee every Tuesday morning at the small cafe near her apartment. Dinner every other Friday at different restaurants around the city. Always with phones turned off and left in the car. But Victoria had learned to be cautious with hope. It was one thing to make promises in the emotional aftermath of a confrontation. It was another to keep them when life got busy again. She'd started her position at Chen Industries 3 weeks ago, not in some made-up role designed to give the CEO's daughter a title, but as a junior analyst in the strategic planning division. Her father had insisted she start at the bottom, like any other new hire. No special treatment, no shortcuts. Victoria reported to a senior analyst named Patricia, who had 20 years of experience and zero patience for incompetence, regardless of whose daughter you were. Victoria loved it. For the first time in her life, she was earning something based on her own merit, not her last name. When Patricia praised her work, it meant something. When she stayed late analyzing market trends and competitive positioning, it was because she wanted to prove herself, not because anyone expected it. The company's annual summer picnic was scheduled for Saturday, and Victoria had mixed feelings about attending. It would be the first time she'd be at a company event as an employee, rather than as Richard Chen's daughter making an appearance. She wasn't sure how people would treat her, whether they'd see her as a colleague or just the boss's kid who got a pity job. Friday evening, as she was packing up her desk, her father appeared at her cubicle. Most people had already left for the weekend, and the office was quiet. Heading out? He asked. Soon. Just finishing this competitive analysis. Patricia wants it Monday morning. And I want it to be perfect. Richard smiled, but there was something sad in his expression. You know, 3 years ago, I would have been proud that you were staying late working. I would have thought it proved your dedication, your work ethic. Now it just reminds me of myself, of how I used work to avoid everything else. Victoria saved her document and turned to face him. Dad, this is different. I'm not avoiding anything. I genuinely enjoy this work, and I want to do well. There's nothing wrong with that. You're right, Richard said. I'm still learning to tell the difference between healthy ambition and unhealthy escape. It's harder than I thought it would be. They'd had several conversations like this over the past 2 months. Her father was trying, really trying, to change decades of ingrained habits. But Victoria could see it wasn't easy for him. He'd catch himself checking his phone during their dinners and would apologize, putting it away. He'd start to talk about work and then stop himself, asking about her day instead. It was like watching someone learn a new language, stumbling over the grammar, but determined to become fluent. Are you coming to the picnic tomorrow? Richard asked. I'm thinking about it. Are you? Karen and I will both be there. She's a much better co-CEO than I ever admitted. Company's running smoother than it has in years, honestly. Turns out I was a bottleneck, not the glue holding everything together. He said it without bitterness, which surprised Victoria. The old Richard Chen would have never admitted that anyone could run his company as well as he could. Will it be weird? Victoria asked. Me being there as an employee, not as your daughter? Probably, Richard admitted. But good weird. I want people to see you as a colleague. I want them to see what you can do on your own. He paused. Speaking of which, Patricia told me you caught an error in the Jenkins report that could have cost us millions if it had gone to the board. She said, "Your analysis was exceptional." Victoria felt warmth spread through her chest. She told you that? She tells me lots of things, usually about how I should stay out of her department and let her do her job. Richard laughed. But yes, she specifically mentioned you, said you have good instincts and you're not afraid to ask questions when you don't understand something. That's rare in new hires. Most of them pretend they know everything. I learned a long time ago that pretending doesn't help anyone, Victoria said quietly. After the accident, I had to ask for help with things I used to do without thinking. It was humbling. But it taught me that admitting you don't know something is the first step to actually learning it. Richard's eyes glistened. You've taught me a lot these past 2 months. About what really matters. About how to be present. I just wish I hadn't needed my 22-year-old daughter to teach me lessons I should have learned decades ago. Better late than never, Victoria said. And she meant it. She wasn't ready to forget 3 years of absence. But she was beginning to believe that people could change if they really wanted to. The next day, Victoria arrived at the picnic to find the company's lakeside property transformed into a festival. There were food trucks, game booths, live music, and hundreds of Chen Industries employees with their families. She'd been to these events before, always feeling like she was on display. The CEO's daughter, who everyone whispered about. The girl in the wheelchair. Richard Chen's tragedy. But today felt different. Several of her co-workers from strategic planning waved her over to their table. They talked about work projects and shared funny stories about Patricia's legendary perfectionism. Nobody treated Victoria like she was special or fragile. They treated her like she was one of them. And it felt amazing. Later in the afternoon, Victoria spotted her father across the lawn. He was talking with Karen Mitchell, the new co-CEO, both of them looking relaxed and engaged. As she watched, Richard pulled out his phone, glanced at it, then deliberately put it back in his pocket and returned his full attention to the conversation. Such a small gesture. But Victoria knew how much it represented. Victoria! She turned to see David and Lily walking toward her. She'd invited them after getting approval to bring guests. And she'd been excited all week about introducing them to her father. David carried a small gift bag, and Lily had a huge smile on her face. "You made it," Victoria said, genuinely happy to see them. Over the past 2 months, she'd met with them several times. Coffee with Lily had turned into regular hangouts, and David had become something of a mentor. Someone she could talk to about navigating family relationships and figuring out who she wanted to be beyond her last name. "Wouldn't miss it," Lily said. "Plus, free food. I'm a recent graduate living on ramen. You can't expect me to turn down free food." David laughed and handed Victoria the gift bag. "It's nothing major, just a little something to celebrate your first real job." Inside was a framed quote. "Success is not about how much you achieve, but about how present you are, for the moments that matter." Below it, David had written a note. "You're going to do amazing things, Victoria, but never forget what really counts." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, both of you, for everything. That day at graduation, you changed something for me. You showed me what was possible." "You did the hard part," David said. "You had the conversation with your father. You gave him a chance to change. That took courage." "Speaking of which," Lily said, nodding toward someone approaching. "Is that him?" Richard had spotted them and was making his way over. Victoria watched her father approach, seeing him through David's eyes for a moment. He looked different than he had 2 months ago, less tense, more open. He was wearing jeans and a casual shirt instead of his usual suit. Small changes, but meaningful ones. "Dad," Victoria said. "I want you to meet the people I told you about. This is David Thompson and his daughter Lily." Richard extended his hand to David, and Victoria saw something pass between them. Understanding. Maybe. Or respect. "Mr. Thompson, my daughter speaks very highly of you both. I owe you a debt of gratitude for being there when I wasn't." "No debt necessary," David said, shaking his hand firmly. "Though I'm glad we could help. Victoria's pretty remarkable." "She is," Richard agreed, and the pride in his voice was unmistakable. "I'm just sorry. It took me so long to really see it." They talked for a while, the four of them, about everything and nothing. Lily and Victoria made plans to go to a concert the following weekend. David and Richard discovered a shared love of old mystery novels. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of conversation that happens between people who genuinely like each other. At one point, Richard's phone rang. Everyone tensed slightly. This was the test, Victoria realized. This was where they'd see if the change was real or just temporary. Richard looked at the screen, and Victoria saw him take a deep breath. Then he declined the call and put the phone away. "Karen can handle it," he said simply. "Whatever it is, it can wait. I'm with my daughter." Victoria felt something inside her chest loosen. A knot she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. Her father had just chosen her over work. It seemed like such a small thing. One declined phone call at a picnic. But it wasn't small. It was everything. Later, as the sun began to set over the lake, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Victoria sat with her father, by the water's edge. The sounds of the picnic continued behind them, but they had this moment of quiet together. "I'm proud of you," Richard said. "Not just for your work, though that's impressive. I'm proud of the person you are. Your strength, your integrity, your kindness. You became all of that despite me, not because of me." "That's not entirely true," Victoria said. "You taught me about dedication and excellence. I just had to learn on my own that those things matter most when applied to relationships, not just business." "When did you get so wise?" "Probably around the time I had to rebuild my entire life from a wheelchair." Trauma has a way of clarifying priorities. Richard was quiet for a moment. "I know I can't erase the past 3 years. I can't give you back the moments I missed or undo the hurt I caused. But I promise you, Victoria, every day forward, I'm going to choose you. Not just when it's convenient or when there's no crisis demanding my attention. Every day, you're my priority." "I believe you," Victoria said, and she realized she meant it. Her father had spent 2 months proving through consistent action that his promises weren't empty. He'd changed his entire life structure to make room for their relationship. That deserved acknowledgement. "We're okay, Dad. We're going to be okay." As they sat there watching the sunset, Victoria thought about that graduation day that had seemed so bleak just 2 months ago. She'd felt abandoned, alone, convinced that her father's love came with conditions she could never quite meet. But sometimes the darkest moments created space for the most important transformations. David had been right about one thing. Time was the only currency that truly mattered. And for the first time in 3 years, Victoria felt rich beyond measure. Not because of the company or the money or the success that surrounded her, but because she had her father back, and he was finally, truly present. Behind them, music drifted across the lawn, and the celebration continued. But in this quiet moment by the water, father and daughter sat together. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything they'd both been searching for all along.